You load into a match full of confidence and then it all goes wrong. Maybe you die in the first minute, maybe you whiff a key play, or maybe your team just gets absolutely steamrolled before you could even breathe. At that moment, the frustration starts bubbling up. The tilt is knocking at the door. And if you're like most players, you already decided in your head, man, this game is a loss. But here's the thing, a bad start doesn't have to be the end of your game. In fact, some of my best wins have come from the matches where the opening went completely off the rails. Today, we're going to break down exactly how to recover from those rough openings, not just mechanically, but mentally, so you could turn those doomed games into some of your most satisfying victories. So the first point I want to talk about is accept the early losses quickly. You know that moment when the first fight goes horribly wrong? You're looking at the kill feed, your team is wiped, and before you can even process what just happened, the enemy is already pushing your spawn doors. I've been there more times than I could count, and the first thing I had to learn was this. The match isn't over just because the start was bad. And the truth is, our brain loves to blow that first loss way out of proportion. It's like dropping your phone in the morning and deciding the entire day is ruined. One bad fight does not define the rest of the match, unless you let it. When you start spiraling in your head, thinking about how the enemy is just better, or how you've already lost, you're not strategizing anymore. You're predicting your own failure, and that's the fastest way to make it come true. Instead, I treat those early fights like a scouting mission. If we lose the first fight, fine. I just got free intel on how the enemy likes to play. Are they rushing every fight? Or are they sitting back and poking? Are they singling out a target first? Every death tells a story, if you're willing to listen. The players who recover from a bad start aren't just magically more skilled, they just don't waste energy on the emotional fallout. They accept the hit early, store the information in their head, and they get ready for the next fight. So here's my rule. Give yourself 5 seconds after a bad start, and in those 5 seconds, just breathe. Let go of the frustration, and think of one actionable thing you could do differently the very next fight. That's it. No complaining, no blaming, no replaying the mistake in your head, just a quick reset. Because the faster you let go of the loss, the faster you can start rebuilding the comeback. The next thing I want to talk about is changing your mindset from win now to play smart. So here's the thing about bad starts. They trick you. They make you feel like you have to make everything back in one giant heroic moment. Like let's say you're down a few points and maybe the scoreboard looks rough. Maybe you're on this respawn screen more than you'd like and your brain immediately goes into this panic mode. You start thinking, I need to turn this around right now. And that's when the danger sets in, because the moment you start chasing the instant win, you stop playing smart. Instead of working with your team, you're running ahead of them. And instead of taking safe fights, you're diving in 1v3, hoping for some miraculous play. And every time it fails, you just get more and more frustrated, which just fuels the tilt spiral. But here's the mindset shift that's changed the way I handle bad starts. Stop thinking about winning it right now and start thinking about how to create small wins that lead to a comeback. It's like playing chess. You don't checkmate someone in one random move when you're behind. You set up little plays that lead to better positions. Maybe you secure a single pick that evens the playing field. Maybe you win just one team fight and use that momentum to control an objective. These tiny wins start stacking up, and suddenly, you're not just surviving, you're steering the game back into your favor. And here's the bonus. When you focus on playing smart instead of playing desperate, you start noticing opportunities you would have missed before. Enemy out of position, a teammate ready to combo with you, a moment where backing off actually leads to a much better push. And the truth is, comebacks are almost never built in one play. They're built on a chain of smart decisions that together tip the balance back in your favor. So the next time you have a bad start, don't chase the miracle. Play for the next good play, then the one after that. That's how you turn a game around without burning yourself out. So now with that established, I want to talk about identifying win conditions mid-game. So here's the thing. A lot of people treat the game's midpoint like they're still in the opening rounds. They're clinging to whatever plan they started with, even if the match has completely shifted. And that's where they lose. Not because they played bad overall, but because they didn't adapt to the new win conditions that appeared mid-game. Mid-game is when the game's real personality shows up. By now, you've seen the enemy's heroes, you've seen the playstyles, You felt where your team's strong and where you're bleeding your resources. And here's the truth. Your win condition may not be the same as when it started. Maybe your strongest duelist is struggling. Maybe their backline is just locking down a lane you thought you control. That's not bad luck. It's a signal. Your job mid-game isn't just to keep playing your role. It's to read the room. Ask yourself, what is my team capable of winning right now? Sometimes that means switching your focus completely. If you realize you can't win the straight up brawls, maybe the win condition becomes, playing the objective quietly while the rest of your team distracts. If you're noticing that the enemy is heavily reliant on one player, maybe your win condition becomes shutting them down, even if it means sacrificing personal stats. It's a bit like poker. You're not playing the cards you wish you had, you're playing the cards on the table. And the earlier you can identify the win condition, the more time you have to shape the game around it. And that's where most people fail, because they recognize the win condition way too late. And by the time they start playing to it, the game is already lost. So in the mid game, start scanning for patterns. Who's overextending? Who's carrying? Who's feeding? Once you see your win condition, commit to it like it's the only way to win. Because at that moment, it usually is. So the next thing I want to talk about is using the enemy's confidence against them. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to your opponent is giving them an early lead. And that sounds kind of strange, right? But here's the thing. When a team gets ahead too fast, they start to relax. They start thinking they've won already. And when people think the game is in the bag, they start taking shortcuts. Maybe they stop grouping up. Maybe they start chasing kills that don't matter. Maybe they stop paying attention to the objectives because in their head, the match is already over. This is where you could turn their overconfidence into your weapon. If you've been behind early, you're already used to playing carefully. You've been forced to think about every move. But the team that's ahead, they're not doing that anymore. They're on autopilot, and autopilot players are easy to punish. You can bait them into really bad fights by looking weak and vulnerable. Let them think you're alone when your team is actually right around the corner. Pretend you're backing off only to re-engage once they overextend. Force them to come to you instead of chasing them. Here's the psychological trick. A team that's ahead expects everything to keep going smoothly. The second you throw a wrench in that, maybe you pick off their top damage dealer. Maybe you win a fight you really shouldn't have. Suddenly, they get nervous. That confidence flips into hesitation, and hesitation is contagious. Once one player on their team starts doubting, the others follow. They start playing slower, they stop taking risk, and now you've stolen the momentum. Recovering from a bad start isn't always about brute forcing your way back into the game. Sometimes it's about letting your opponents beat themselves. You just have to give them the opportunity to do it. And so here's the final point. It's resetting emotionally between fights. When you've had a bad start, your emotions are often running on overdrive. You're frustrated about the early deaths. You're replaying every mistake in your head. You're telling yourself you have to make up for it in the next one. And here's the thing, that mindset, it almost guarantees you'll keep making the same mistakes. Because when you're tilted, your decision making gets hijacked. You're no longer reading the game. You're reacting to your own feelings. And reaction-based play tends to be so sloppy. You dive in too early, you overcommit to a target, you take risk you normally wouldn't take. So instead, you need to create an emotional reset between fights. Think of it like hitting a mental refresh button before every single engagement. Sometimes that's as simple as, taking a deep breath like I mentioned earlier while you're respawning. Just inhale slowly, exhale slower, let the tension physically leave your body, and it sounds small, but you'd be amazed on how much calmer you'll feel. Other times, it's about reframing your thinking. You can't change what happened last fight, but you can change the next one. If the last fight was a disaster, fine. That's in the rearview mirror. What matters now is entering the next fight with a clear head so you can make the best possible decisions. And if you really want to get good at this, practice treating each fight like its own little minigame. Don't think of the match as, oh, we're behind, or oh, we're losing, or oh, my team sucks. Think this next fight is 0-0, fresh start. If we win this, we take the momentum. And that's the kind of mental framing that keeps you sharp and stops the tilt before it even starts. Because the truth is, when you master the skill of resetting emotionally, you're no longer chained to the outcome of the last play. You start every fight like it's the first one of the game, and that makes you dangerous, no matter how bad the early game looked. So at the end of the day, climbing isn't just about who has the better aim, who has the sharper reactions, or even the perfect teamwork. It's about keeping your head clear and your decisions sharp, no matter what the scoreboard says. You can't control every single match, but you can control how you adapt, how you think, and how you bounce back. The players who rise the fastest aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who stop letting those mistakes define the rest of the game. So the next time you're in the middle of a tense match, just remember, accept the early losses, shift your mindset, figure out your win conditions, turn their confidence into their downfall, and just please make sure to reset every fight. If you could do that consistently, you're not just going to win more games, you're going to feel a whole lot better and way less stress about it while doing it. All right, y'all. Well, that's all from me. I'll see you in the next one. Good luck out there.